Captain Jake Morrison wiped sweat from his forehead as he maneuvered his damaged cargo hauler through the asteroid field surrounding Kepler 442b. The hull had taken a beating from Space Pirate's 3 systems back, and his navigation computer kept glitching every few minutes. What should have been a routine supply run to the outer colonies had turned into a nightmare. The ship's proximity alarm screamed as another massive asteroid drifted too close. Jake cursed under his breath and fired the lateral thrusters, barely avoiding a collision that would have turned him into space dust. His hands moved across the control panel with practiced efficiency, but even his 15 years of piloting experience couldn't mask the fact that his ship was falling apart around him. A strange energy signature appeared on his damaged sensors. At first, Jake thought it might be another ship, maybe even rescue. But as he got closer, he realized it was something else entirely. Floating in the void between 2 massive asteroids was what looked like a metallic egg, about the size of a small shuttle. It pulsed with a faint blue light that seemed almost alive. Jake's rational mind told him to ignore it and focus on getting his ship to safety, but something about the object called to him. Maybe it was valuable salvage that could pay for his ship repairs. Maybe it was his curiosity getting the better of him again. Either way, he found himself extending the cargo bay's mechanical arm to retrieve the mysterious object. The moment the egg touched his ship's hull, Jake felt a strange tingling sensation in the back of his mind. It was like someone had just whispered his name, but he was completely alone on the ship. He shook his head, attributing it to stress and exhaustion from the long journey. As he secured the egg in his cargo hold, Jake noticed his ship's systems were running smoother than they had in months. The engine noise that had been bothering him for weeks was gone, and his navigation computer had stopped glitching. Even the damaged hull plating seemed to be holding better than it should have been. The nearest inhabited planet was still 2 days away, but Jake felt oddly confident about making the journey now. He set his course for New Terra Station and settled in for the long flight, unaware that the egg in his cargo hold was slowly beginning to crack. During the night cycle, as Jake slept in his pilot's quarters, soft blue light filled the cargo bay. The cracks in the metallic shell spread like a spider web, and something inside began to stir. When Jake woke up 8 hours later to check his instruments, everything seemed normal. But if he had looked more carefully at his cargo bay monitors, he might have noticed that the egg was no longer where he had left it. The tingling sensation in his mind had grown stronger overnight, but Jake dismissed it as a side effect of recycled air and artificial gravity. He had no way of knowing that somewhere in the depths of his ship, a small dragon-like creature with scales that shimmered like starlight was exploring its new surroundings, already forming an unbreakable bond with the human who had rescued its egg from the cold void of space. As New Terra Station grew larger on his view screen, Jake felt more optimistic than he had in months. His ship was running perfectly, he had mysterious salvage to sell, and he was finally going to get off this trade route that had brought him nothing but trouble. He had no idea that his life was about to become far more complicated than he could ever imagine. The space station's traffic control contacted him for his cargo manifest, and Jake listed the usual supplies he was carrying. He decided not to mention the egg until he could figure out what it was worth. Sometimes it was better to keep valuable finds quiet until you knew who might be interested in buying them. What Jake didn't know was that his salvage was actually a royal dragon egg belonging to the most powerful ruler in the Galactic Federation, and that ruler had been searching for their missing heir for over 6 months, offering rewards that could buy entire star systems for information leading to its safe return. Jake's first clue that something was seriously wrong came when he opened his cargo bay doors at New Terra Station. Instead of finding his mysterious egg sitting where he had left it, he discovered his entire cargo hold had been rearranged. Supply crates were stacked in perfect pyramids, and his spare parts were organized by size and function in ways that would have taken him hours to accomplish. At the center of it all sat a small creature about the size of a house cat, with scales that shifted between deep blue and silver depending on how the light hit them. It had 4 legs, tiny wings that were clearly too small for flight, and eyes that held an intelligence that made Jake's breath catch in his throat. The creature looked up at him and made a sound that was part chirp, part purr. Jake's first instinct was to panic. Unknown alien species meant quarantine, government involvement, and questions he definitely couldn't answer. His second instinct was to grab his stunner and contain the creature before it could cause any damage. But when he looked into those intelligent eyes, he found he couldn't bring himself to see it as a threat. The creature seemed to sense his hesitation and took a tentative step forward. As it moved, Jake felt that tingling sensation in his mind again, but this time it came with images. He saw flashes of the cold void where he had found the egg, felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude, and somehow understood that the creature was trying to say thank you. "You're telepathic," Jake whispered, more to himself than to the creature. The dragon-like being tilted its head and chirped again, and Jake caught another flash of emotion, loneliness, fear, and underneath it all, a desperate need for companionship that resonated with something deep in his own soul. Jake had been alone on trade routes for most of his adult life. He understood loneliness better than most people, and despite every rational thought telling him this was a terrible idea, he found himself kneeling down and extending his hand toward the creature. The moment the dragon's tiny claws touched his palm, Jake's world exploded with sensation. He felt the creature's memories flowing into his mind like a river. He saw magnificent cities built into the sides of mountains, dragons the size of starships soaring through alien skies, and creatures of incredible beauty and power living in harmony with technology beyond human understanding. But he also felt the dragon's current state. It was barely more than a hatchling, confused and frightened by its early emergence from the egg. It had been alone for what felt like an eternity before Jake found it, and now it saw him as its family, its protector, its bonded partner for life. "Oh no," Jake muttered as the full implications hit him. This wasn't just some alien pet he could sell or turn over to the authorities. This creature had bonded with him on a level deeper than anything he had ever experienced. He could feel its emotions as clearly as his own, and he knew with absolute certainty that separating them would cause them both tremendous pain. The dragon seemed to understand his distress and nuzzled against his hand, projecting feelings of comfort and reassurance. Through their link, Jake caught glimpses of what the creature knew about its own kind. Dragons bonded for life. They were incredibly long-lived, fiercely loyal, and possessed abilities that grew stronger as they aged. They were also, according to the fragmentary memories he was receiving, considered extremely valuable by certain groups in the galaxy. Jake made his decision quickly, the way he had learned to do during his years as a pilot. He couldn't turn the dragon over to the authorities, and he couldn't abandon it. That meant he was going to have to figure out how to care for a telepathic alien creature while keeping its existence secret from the rest of the galaxy. "All right, little one," he said softly. "Looks like we're partners now, but we're going to have to be very careful about who we trust." The dragon chirped happily and scrambled up his arm to perch on his shoulder. As it settled into place, Jake felt a warmth spread through his body that seemed to strengthen him physically as well as mentally. His chronic back pain from years of sitting in pilot chairs disappeared, and his vision became sharper than it had been since his 20s. Jake finished his business at the station quickly, purchasing extra food supplies and a few items he thought might be useful for caring for his new companion. He told the merchants he was stocking up for a long haul to the frontier worlds, which was true enough. He needed to find somewhere isolated where he and the dragon could figure out their new situation without attracting unwanted attention. As he prepared to leave New Terra Station, Jake had no idea that his arrival and departure had been noted by Federation intelligence agents who had been monitoring all traffic in the sector. The dragon's royal bloodline carried genetic markers that could be detected by the right scanners, and those agents were already sending coded messages to their superiors about a possible lead in their long search for the missing heir. 3 weeks into their partnership, Jake discovered that caring for a dragon was unlike anything he could have imagined. The creature, which he had started calling Nova because of the way its scales sparkled like distant stars, was growing at an alarming rate. What had started as a cat-sized hatchling was now the size of a large dog, and its appetite was becoming a serious concern. Nova didn't eat normal food. Instead, it seemed to feed on energy itself. Jake watched in fascination as his companion would press its claws against his ship's power conduits and somehow draw electricity directly into its body. The process didn't drain his ship's systems, though. If anything, they seemed to run more efficiently after Nova had fed. The telepathic bond between them was growing stronger every day. Jake could now sense Nova's emotions even when they were in different parts of the ship, and sometimes he caught glimpses of memories that definitely didn't belong to either of them. Ancient memories of a vast empire, of dragons flying between the stars themselves, of a golden palace floating in the void above a planet he didn't recognize. Nova was also developing new abilities that both amazed and worried Jake. The dragon could now generate small electrical fields with its claws, perfect for making minor repairs to ship systems. It had learned to manipulate gravity around its body, allowing it to walk on the walls and ceiling of the ship as easily as the floor. And most unsettling of all, Nova seemed to understand human technology intuitively, often solving problems before Jake even realized they existed. They had taken refuge in an abandoned mining station in the Vega system, a place so far off the main trade routes that Jake felt relatively safe. But even in isolation, he was starting to realize that Nova's presence was changing him in ways he didn't fully understand. His reflexes had become faster, his thinking clearer, and he found himself understanding complex technical manuals that would have baffled him before. The changes weren't just physical and mental. Jake was also experiencing flashes of knowledge that seemed to come from nowhere. He suddenly knew how to perform maintenance procedures he had never learned, could navigate using star patterns he had never studied, and found himself speaking words in a language he didn't recognize but somehow understood perfectly. It was during one of these episodes that Jake first heard the word Draconis echo through his mind. Nova perked up immediately when the word surfaced, projecting intense emotions of recognition and something that felt like homesickness. Through their bond, Jake caught fragments of meaning. Draconis was Nova's homeworld, a place of impossible beauty where dragons and their bonded partners ruled a vast interstellar civilization. "You're not just any dragon, are you?" Jake asked, looking into Nova's increasingly intelligent eyes. The response he received through their link was complex and somewhat overwhelming. Nova was trying to explain concepts that didn't translate well into human understanding, but the basic message was clear. Nova was indeed special, born to a bloodline that carried great responsibility and power. That revelation was interrupted by the ship's proximity alarms. 3 vessels had just dropped out of hyperspace near the mining station, and their design was unlike anything in Jake's extensive knowledge of spacecraft. The ships were sleek and organic-looking, as if they had been grown rather than built, and they moved with a grace that suggested technology far beyond anything the human colonies possessed. Nova began making sounds Jake had never heard before, a complex series of chirps and trills that seemed almost like a language. The dragon's emotions were a mixture of excitement and anxiety, and through their bond Jake sensed both hope and fear. The lead ship transmitted a message on standard galactic frequencies, but the language was one Jake didn't recognize. However, Nova seemed to understand every word, and through their link Jake caught the basic meaning. The ships were searching for someone very important, someone who had been lost for many months. They were offering vast rewards for information, but also making clear that any harm to their missing charge would result in severe consequences. Jake felt his blood run cold as he realized the implications. Nova wasn't just any dragon, and these weren't just any search ships. This was a royal search party, looking for a missing member of their ruling family, and that missing royal was currently perched on his shoulder, trying to decide whether these ships represented rescue or danger. Through their bond, Jake sensed Nova's internal conflict. Part of the young dragon wanted to call out to the ships, to end the separation from its own kind. But another part was afraid of leaving Jake, afraid of losing the bond they had formed. Nova had never experienced anything like their telepathic connection before, and the thought of breaking it was causing the dragon genuine distress. Jake made a decision that surprised even himself. Instead of immediately contacting the ships and turning Nova over to its own people, he powered down his ship's systems and moved them deeper into the mining station's asteroid field. If Nova was truly royalty, then returning it might be the right thing to do. But Jake needed to understand the full situation first, and he needed to make sure that Nova would be safe and happy with whatever choice they made. As the search ships moved past their hiding spot, Jake felt Nova's gratitude through their bond. The dragon had chosen to trust him completely, and Jake was determined to prove worthy of that trust, even if it meant going up against an entire galactic empire. The search ships remained in the Vega system for 5 days, methodically scanning every asteroid and abandoned structure. Jake watched them work from his hiding spot deep within the mining station, impressed despite himself by their thorough professionalism. These weren't random pirates or opportunistic bounty hunters. They moved with the precision of military units, but with a care and patience that suggested they genuinely wanted to recover their target alive and unharmed. Nova spent those 5 days in an increasingly agitated state. The dragon would alternate between trying to reach out telepathically toward the ships and then recoiling as if afraid of what might happen if it made contact. Through their bond, Jake experienced fragments of Nova's memories about life in the royal court of Draconis. The images were overwhelming. Jake saw vast crystal spires reaching toward purple skies, dragons larger than his cargo ship flying in formation above cities that floated on clouds, and ceremonies involving hundreds of dragons and their bonded partners. But he also sensed something darker underneath those beautiful memories. Politics, expectations, responsibilities that Nova wasn't ready to handle, and a deep loneliness despite being surrounded by its own kind. On the 4th day, Jake finally understood why Nova was so conflicted about returning home. The young dragon had been sent away from Draconis as part of a coming-of-age ritual, expected to find and bond with a worthy partner before returning to claim its birthright. But the ritual had gone wrong. Nova's egg had been lost in transit, ending up floating in the asteroid field where Jake found it months later than it should have hatched. During those months in cold storage, Nova had missed crucial developmental stages. It should have been much larger and more mature by now, with abilities that were still developing slowly. Worse, it should have bonded with someone from the dragon civilization, someone who understood the responsibilities and protocols of royal life. Instead, it had bonded with a human cargo pilot who knew nothing about dragon culture or politics. "You think they'll be disappointed in you?" Jake said softly as Nova curled up next to him in the ship's cramped living quarters. The dragon's response was a complex mix of emotions, but the core message was clear. Nova was afraid that its family would see the bond with Jake as a failure, a sign that it wasn't ready for the responsibilities of royal life. Jake felt a surge of protective anger on Nova's behalf. He had been judged and found wanting by people in authority his entire life. Teachers who said he wasn't smart enough for advanced education, military recruiters who said he lacked leadership potential, corporate executives who saw him as just another replaceable pilot. The idea that anyone would judge Nova based on circumstances completely beyond the dragon's control infuriated him. "Listen to me," Jake said, placing his hand on Nova's scaled head. "I don't care what they expect or what they think you should be. You're brave, intelligent, and loyal. You've helped me keep my ship running, kept me company on the loneliest routes in the galaxy, and become the best partner I've ever had. If they can't see how amazing you are, then that's their problem, not yours." Nova's emotional response was so strong that it brought tears to Jake's eyes. The dragon had never experienced unconditional acceptance before. In royal life, everything was measured against expectations and requirements. Jake's simple declaration of faith in Nova's worth, regardless of any external standards, was something entirely new for the young dragon. That night, Nova made its decision. Using abilities that were growing stronger every day, the dragon reached out telepathically to the search ships. The communication was brief and carefully controlled. Nova identified itself and its location, but also made clear that it would only meet with the search party under specific conditions. Jake felt the moment of contact through their bond, and he was amazed by Nova's diplomatic skill. The young dragon had inherited more than just royal blood. It had natural political instincts that allowed it to convey authority, despite its youth and current circumstances. The response from the search ships was immediate and overwhelming. Jake's sensors detected multiple high-energy transmissions being sent toward the galactic core, and he realized that word of Nova's discovery was being relayed to the highest levels of the dragon government. Within hours, his long-range communications started picking up chatter about massive fleets changing course toward the Vega system. Nova's family wasn't just sending a few ships to retrieve their missing royal. They were mobilizing what sounded like a significant portion of their space fleet, either to ensure Nova's safe return or to deal with whoever might have been holding the dragon against its will. "How important are you exactly?" Jake asked, though he was beginning to suspect he didn't really want to know the answer. Nova's response was accompanied by memories that made Jake's jaw drop. The dragon wasn't just any member of the royal family. It was the direct heir to the throne of the Draconis Empire, the most powerful single entity in the known galaxy. When Nova came of age and completed its bonding ritual, it would inherit control of thousands of star systems and the loyalty of millions of dragons and their partners. The search ships were requesting permission to board the mining station, and Nova was preparing to agree to the meeting. Through their bond, Jake sensed the dragon's determination to make its family understand that its bond with Jake wasn't a mistake to be corrected, but a choice to be respected. As Jake prepared to meet representatives of the most powerful government in the galaxy, he couldn't help but smile grimly. He had spent his entire adult life trying to avoid entanglements with authority figures and political complications. Now he was about to become personally involved in dragon royal succession politics at the highest level. But looking at Nova, seeing the confidence and determination in the young dragon's eyes, Jake knew he wouldn't change anything about their partnership. If the Dragon Empire couldn't accept Nova's choice, then they would face both dragon and human together. The delegation that arrived at the mining station was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. 3 dragons, each the size of his entire cargo ship, landed with impossible grace on the asteroid's surface. Their scales seemed to contain entire galaxies, shifting and swirling with patterns of light that hurt to look at directly. Behind them came smaller dragons, though still massive by human standards, wearing what could only be described as ceremonial armor that gleamed like captured starlight. The leader of the delegation was a dragon so ancient and powerful that Jake felt his knees go weak just being in its presence. When it spoke, the voice resonated not just through the air but directly into Jake's mind, bypassing his ears entirely and speaking to something deeper than his conscious thoughts. "I am Thessarian the Eternal, Prime Regent of the Draconess Empire and Guardian of the Royal Bloodline," the massive dragon declared. "I have come to retrieve Prince Zephyr and return him to his rightful place among his people." Nova, who Jake now knew was actually Prince Zephyr, stepped forward with dignity that belied its still small size. Through their bond, Jake felt the young dragon drawing on reserves of royal training and inherited authority to meet its elder as an equal, despite the vast difference in their apparent power. "I greet you, Regent Thessarian," Nova replied, its telepathic voice carrying new harmonics of authority that Jake had never heard before. "I am grateful for your concern and for the efforts of those who searched for me. However, I must inform you that my circumstances have changed in ways that require careful consideration." Jake watched the exchange with growing amazement. Nova was conducting itself like a seasoned diplomat, using formal language and protocols that it must have absorbed from genetic memory or inherited instinct. The contrast between the tiny dragon he knew as his companion and the royal heir speaking with such authority was startling. Regent Thessarian's massive eyes turned to Jake, and he felt as if his entire life was being examined and weighed in an instant. "You are the human who found Prince Zephyr's stasis pod. The Empire is grateful for your service and will reward you appropriately. However, the prince must now return to complete his education and prepare for his eventual succession to the throne." "With respect, Regent," Nova interjected before Jake could speak. "The situation is more complex than that. I have formed a bond with Captain Morrison that goes beyond simple gratitude. According to the ancient laws of our people, such bonds are sacred and cannot be broken without causing permanent damage to both parties involved." The silence that followed Nova's statement was so complete that Jake could hear his own heartbeat. Through their bond, he felt Nova's nervousness beneath its outward calm, but also an unshakable determination to fight for their partnership, regardless of the consequences. Regent Thessarian moved closer to Nova, and Jake instinctively stepped forward to place himself between them. The gesture was completely futile against a being that could probably vaporize him with a thought, but he couldn't help himself. Nova was his partner, and he would protect the young dragon regardless of the odds. "Interesting," Thessarian murmured, its ancient eyes studying Jake with new interest. "You would stand against the might of the Empire to defend your bond with Prince Zephyr, even knowing that it could cost you your life?" "Nova, Prince Zephyr chose me as much as I chose him," Jake said, surprised by how steady his own voice sounded. "I don't fully understand your laws or your politics, but I know what loyalty means. If Zephyr wants to come home with you, I won't stand in the way. But I won't let anyone force him into a decision he's not ready to make." Through their bond, Jake felt Nova's surge of gratitude and affection. The young dragon moved to stand beside him, presenting a united front to the delegation. When Nova spoke again, its voice carried new strength drawn from their partnership. Captain Morrison speaks truly, Regent. Our bond has made us both stronger. Through our connection, I have learned about human resilience, adaptability, and the strength that comes from choosing your own path, rather than simply following the expectations of others. These lessons will make me a better ruler when the time comes. The Sarian was quiet for a long moment, its ancient mind clearly processing implications that Jake couldn't even imagine. When the regent finally spoke, its voice carried a note of something that might have been amusement. You invoked the bonding laws, Prince Zephyr. Very well. But you must understand that if this bond is genuine, it carries obligations for both parties. Captain Morrison would become a member of the royal household, with all the responsibilities and protections that status entails. Are you both prepared for such a commitment? Jake felt Nova's shock through their bond. Apparently, this possibility hadn't occurred to the young dragon either. Through their telepathic connection, Jake caught fragments of what membership in the dragon royal household would mean. Political responsibilities, ceremonial duties, protection from the Empire's enemies, but also constraints on his freedom that would fundamentally change his entire way of life. I need to understand what this would mean, Jake said carefully, for both of us. I won't make a decision that affects Nova's future without knowing all the consequences. Regent Thessarian actually seemed pleased by Jake's caution. Wisdom beyond your years, human, very well. You will both accompany the delegation to Draconis, where the bond between you can be properly evaluated and its implications fully explained. If the bond is genuine and beneficial to Prince Zephyr's development, it will be formally recognized by the Empire. If not, the regent didn't finish the sentence, but the implication was clear. Jake and Nova exchanged a look, their bond carrying a wealth of communication in an instant. They had come this far together, and they would see it through to the end, whatever that might bring. We accept your terms, Regent, Nova said formally. We will travel to Draconis and submit to the proper evaluation of our bond. As preparations began for their journey to the capital of the Dragon Empire, Jake couldn't help but wonder what he had gotten himself into. He had started this adventure as a simple cargo pilot looking for salvage to pay his bills. Now he was apparently about to become involved in the succession politics of the most powerful civilization in the galaxy. The journey to Draconis took 3 weeks aboard the Dragon Fleet's flagship, a vessel so massive that Jake's entire ship could have fit comfortably in one of its smaller storage bays. The ship itself was a marvel of biotechnology, its walls alive with organic circuits that pulsed with soft light, and its corridors shaped by what appeared to be controlled growth rather than construction. Nova adapted to their new surroundings with remarkable ease, its royal heritage asserting itself as they moved through spaces designed for dragon comfort. Jake, on the other hand, found himself struggling with the sheer scale of everything around him. Doorways were sized for creatures the length of subway trains, and the artificial gravity felt different in subtle ways that left him constantly off balance. During the journey, Jake was assigned a tutor, a smaller dragon named Kiriel who had been tasked with explaining dragon culture and politics to him. Through a combination of telepathic communication and holographic displays, Kiriel painted a picture of a civilization so vast and ancient that Jake struggled to comprehend it. The Draconis Empire controlled over 10,000 star systems, with dragons and their bonded partners serving as both rulers and protectors of countless species. The bond between dragons and their partners wasn't just personal, it was the foundation of their entire governmental system. A dragon without a proper bond was considered incomplete, unable to reach their full potential or exercise the wisdom necessary for leadership. The bond enhances both parties, Kiriel explained during one of their sessions. Dragons gain emotional depth and intuitive understanding from their partners, while the partners receive enhanced physical abilities and access to draconic knowledge. But not all bonds are equal. The strongest connections transform both individuals into something greater than either could be alone. Jake was beginning to understand why Nova's choice of a human partner was so controversial. Dragons typically bonded with members of species that had evolved alongside them, beings who understood the responsibilities and protocols of imperial life. Humans were newcomers to the galactic stage, with no established relationship to dragon culture. What worried Jake most was learning about the testing process they would face on Draconis. The bond evaluation wasn't just a simple interview or examination. It involved telepathic probes that would lay bare both his and Nova's minds, exposing every thought, memory, and emotion to the scrutiny of the Empire's most powerful telepaths. "They will see everything," Nova admitted during one of their private conversations in Jake's assigned quarters. "My doubts about royal life, your memories of loneliness and failure, the way we complete each other's weaknesses. There will be no hiding anything from them." "Maybe that's not such a bad thing," Jake replied, though he felt far from confident. "If they can see everything, then they'll also see that our bond is real. They'll understand that we make each other better." Through their connection, Jake felt Nova's uncertainty. The young dragon had been raised to believe that royal bonds should follow certain patterns, involve certain kinds of partners, and produce certain predictable results. What they had was something entirely different, and neither of them was sure how the Empire's traditionalists would react to such an unprecedented situation. As they approached the Draconis system, Jake got his first glimpse of the dragon homeworld through the ship's observation decks. The planet was a stunning jewel of blue and green, but what took his breath away were the structures visible even from space. Enormous crystal spires reached from the surface into orbit, connected by bridges of what looked like solid light. Dragons the size of small moons moved between the orbital platforms, their scales catching and reflecting the light of 3 different suns. "It's beautiful," Jake breathed, and through their bond he felt Nova's pride in its heritage mixing with anxiety about whether Jake would be able to adapt to such an alien environment. The landing process took hours, with the ship navigating through layers of orbital infrastructure that managed traffic to and from the planet's surface. Jake saw dragons of every conceivable size and color, from tiny creatures no larger than birds to ancient beings whose scales had taken on the appearance of miniature galaxies. Many were accompanied by bonded partners from dozens of different species, though Jake noticed he was the only human visible. When they finally touched down at the Imperial Palace, Jake was overwhelmed by the sheer scale of everything around him. The buildings were sized for creatures that could fly, with soaring arches and vertical spaces that made him feel like an insect. The other beings moving through the palace corridors regarded him with curiosity and sometimes suspicion. Clearly aware that something unusual was happening, Nova guided him through the initial protocols with growing confidence, the young dragon's royal training asserting itself now that they were in familiar surroundings. Jake was assigned quarters in a section of the palace reserved for visiting dignitaries, while Nova was expected to take up residence in the royal wing. "We should stay together," Jake said when he learned about the sleeping arrangements. "If they're going to evaluate our bond, they should see how it actually works on a daily basis." Nova's request to share quarters with Jake raised eyebrows throughout the palace staff, but it was ultimately approved by Regent Thessarian. As they settled into their new accommodations, Jake realized that their real test was just beginning. Tomorrow they would face the Council of Bonded Pairs, the most powerful telepathic judges in the Empire. Through their bond, Jake felt Nova's determination to prove that their partnership was not just valid, but beneficial to both the dragon and the Empire as a whole. They had come too far together to be separated now by political traditions or cultural prejudices. As Jake fell asleep in chambers designed for beings 10 times his size, he dreamed of flying among stars with Nova at his side, no longer bound by the limitations of ships or technology, but soaring through space itself as partners in the truest sense of the word. The Council of Bonded Pairs convened in a chamber that defied human understanding of architecture. The walls curved upward into infinity, lined with alcoves where ancient dragons and their partners resided in meditation poses that they had maintained for centuries. At the center of the space stood a crystalline formation that hummed with telepathic energy, designed to amplify and focus the mental abilities of everyone present. Jake stood beside Nova in the center of the chamber, trying to maintain his composure, as dozens of the most powerful minds in the galaxy focused their attention on him. The telepathic pressure was almost overwhelming, like standing in the middle of a hurricane made of thoughts and emotions. Regent Thessarian spoke for the council, its ancient voice carrying the weight of imperial authority. "Prince Zephyr and Captain Morrison, you stand before this assembly to have your bond evaluated according to the ancient laws of our people. This process will reveal the true nature of your connection and determine whether it serves the best interests of both parties and the Empire as a whole." The examination began gently, with subtle telepathic probes that felt like whispers at the edge of Jake's consciousness. The council members were scanning the surface layers of his mind, examining his recent memories and immediate emotions. Jake felt Nova's presence beside him in the mental space, the young dragon's mind intertwining with his own to present a unified front to their examiners. As the probes went deeper, Jake experienced the strange sensation of having his entire life laid bare before beings whose mental capacities were beyond his comprehension. They saw his childhood on Earth, his struggles to find purpose in life, his years of loneliness traveling the trade routes between distant worlds. But they also saw how Nova's presence had changed everything, bringing meaning and connection to an existence that had been drifting without direction. The council's attention turned to Nova next, and Jake felt the young dragon's nervousness as its own mind was subjected to scrutiny. The examiners saw Nova's frustration with the rigid protocols of royal life, its desire for genuine connection rather than ceremonial respect, and its joy at finding a partner who valued it for its true self rather than its inherited status. What surprised Jake was how his own memories looked when viewed through the council's telepathic perspective. His simple act of rescuing Nova's egg from the asteroid field appeared as a moment of cosmic significance, a choice that had altered the course of galactic history. His decision to protect Nova from the search ships was seen as an act of courage, worthy of imperial recognition. The deeper the examination went, the more Jake realized that the council was discovering things about the bond that even he and Nova hadn't fully understood. Their telepathic connection was far stronger than either of them had realized, creating a feedback loop that enhanced both of their abilities exponentially. Nova's dragon powers were developing faster because of Jake's emotional stability, while Jake's human adaptability was being enhanced by Nova's draconic insights. "Fascinating," murmured one of the ancient council members, a dragon so old that its scales had become translucent with age. "The bond exhibits characteristics we have not observed in over a millennium. The human's emotional resilience is providing the prince with psychological grounding that allows for accelerated development of natural abilities." Another council member, a being whose partner appeared to be made of living crystal, added its own observations. More significantly, the prince's inherited knowledge is being filtered through the human's practical experience, creating novel solutions to problems that have challenged our civilization for generations. Jake felt Nova's surprise at this assessment. Through their bond, he caught glimpses of the ways their partnership had been unconsciously solving complex theoretical problems that Nova's tutors had been struggling to explain. Jake's intuitive understanding of engineering and navigation, enhanced by Nova's draconic knowledge, had created hybrid insights that neither of them could have achieved alone. The examination reached its climax when the council attempted to probe the deepest levels of their bond. Jake felt as if his very soul was being examined, every hope and fear laid bare before the assembled judges. But instead of feeling violated or diminished by the experience, he found himself strengthened by Nova's presence in his mind, their connection becoming a source of power rather than vulnerability. At the moment of deepest scrutiny, something unexpected happened. The crystalline formation at the center of the chamber began to resonate with their bond, its humming rising to a frequency that made the air itself seem to sing. Light poured from the crystal and enveloped both Jake and Nova, and suddenly every member of the council was experiencing their connection from the inside. For just a moment, the most powerful beings in the galaxy felt what it was like to be two lonely souls finding completion in each other. They experienced Jake's wonder at discovering Nova's intelligence and loyalty, and Nova's joy at finding acceptance without judgment. They felt the way the bond had transformed both partners into something greater than either could be alone. When the light faded and the examination was complete, the chamber fell into absolute silence. Jake and Nova stood together, their bond stronger than ever after being tested by the most rigorous telepathic scrutiny imaginable. Regent Thessarian spoke first, its ancient voice carrying notes of amazement. In 2,000 years of conducting bond evaluations, this council has never witnessed such a perfect integration of souls. The connection between Prince Zephyr and Captain Morrison transcends traditional categories. It is not merely beneficial to both parties, it is essential to their continued development. The formal declaration that followed made Jake's head spin with its implications. Their bond was not only recognized by the Empire, it was being elevated to the status of a royal partnership, with Jake receiving the title of Imperial Consort and all the rights and responsibilities that came with it. As they left the chamber together, Jake realized that his life as a simple cargo pilot was truly over. But looking at Nova, seeing the happiness and confidence radiating from his partner through their bond, he knew that what they were building together would be far more amazing than anything he could have achieved alone. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders, and now he and Nova would explore it together as equals. Partners in the truest sense of the word, bound by a connection that had impressed even the most ancient and powerful minds in the known universe. Their story was just beginning.